President Trump's war in Iran is putting him in conflict with some of his biggest supporters. MAGA media figures like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly are breaking with the president, expressing skepticism of the military campaign to their large audiences. Here to break it down is The Hill's media reporter, Dominic Mastrangelo. Hey, Dominic. So what are the president's critics on the right saying, and what is their issue with this war?
Well, this is fairly surprising to see figures like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, who are usually pretty loyal to the president, pretty supportive of most of his policy objectives, to hear them breaking with him on something like this. Megyn Kelly, for example, has really sort of railed against this war from the beginning when there was reports that the president was even eyeing any kind of strike in Iran, saying that the president would come to regret something like this. Tucker Carlson has long been a critic of Israel and has suggested that Trump is being influenced.
All right, friends, welcome back to Blue Line Media. So what just happened? This is raw frustration, and it is understandable. Threatening to wipe out civilian populations is not strategy. It is not chess. It is conduct that critics describe as a war crime dressed up as negotiation. A president who cannot project strength without threatening mass harm is not strong in the eyes of those critics. He is dangerous. Hi again, everybody. It is now 5 in New York, and we have an enormous amount of ground to cover tonight. Any homeowner will tell you this fundamental truth about disaster. Water damage is always exponentially worse than you initially think when you first see water dripping from your ceiling.
By Israel in some capacity to act militarily in the Middle East. Both of the pundits and others in the right-wing media ecosystem have suggested that Americans don't want this war, that many of folks remember the wars in the Middle East have passed and don't want to send their dollars and potentially American lives at risk with conflict. So it is certainly very interesting to see these folks that typically are very supportive of the president break with him on this very consequential issue.
Do you see a divide in conservative so-called new media coverage versus maybe more traditional coverage from outlets like Fox News and the Wall Street Journal editorial board?
Yes, there really does seem to be a pretty big break there. Many of the hosts on Fox are largely supportive of the president's objectives militarily in Iran. They are saying this is peace through strength. You see them saying a lot of the same things that you're hearing from the White House podium.
That immediate moment is absolutely horrifying. What you can see with your own eyes is awful and deeply traumatic, but it is the lasting damage that truly destroys everything. The deeper damage lurking under the surface, behind the drywall and down into the very foundation of the structure, the mold that grows unseen, the smell that never quite goes away, the rot that spreads silently through the bones of the building. So often the real damage is orders of magnitude worse than what is immediately visible. This should be easy enough for a former real estate developer to understand on a conceptual level.
Trump said they have, quote, low IQs and are, quote, stupid people. Tucker Carlson responded to Trump's attacks, telling Newsmax, quote, I've always liked Trump and still feel sorry for him as I do all slaves. He's hemmed in by other forces. He can't make his own decisions. It is awful to watch. Carlson also trolled Trump by selling merchandise on his site referencing Trump's low IQ attacks.
And that theory applies perfectly to what is happening right now in American politics. A significant share of Donald Trump's most high-profile political supporters are now, in truly unprecedented fashion, actively seeking to separate themselves from him. They are not just distancing from his policies anymore, not just backing away from his handling of the Iran conflict and the Epstein files. They are separating themselves from the man himself, from his fundamental character.
The Wall Street Journal, as you noted, has also, in its editorial page, has urged the president against stopping strikes there because of what they are calling, short-term economic pain. Americans are feeling that at the gas pump. That really is it stands in contrast to many of the folks in the sort of podcast sphere and the new media realm, like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, who both worked at Fox for a long time, who are vehemently opposed to this. So there really does seem to be quite a break there within the conservative movement.
Megyn Kelly came out and said the deal sounds very much like surrender on our part, which she added she is actually in favor of. Her reasoning was striking. She said we needed this to end. Whether it ended on favorable terms or any other way, it simply needed to end. She described the entire enterprise as a mistake from the very beginning, a mistake throughout its execution, and a mistake that continues to this day. But here is where her analysis gets truly significant for the Trump political operation. The young voter coalition that Charlie Kirk worked hard to deliver to the president is now showing signs of erosion.
If we look back to the 2024 election, President Trump pitched himself as the anti-war candidate focused on things like fixing the economy. He also went on these non-political podcasts, maybe think of people like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, as a way to reach maybe less engaged voters and independents. What are those media outlets saying about the war and the Trump presidency on a larger scale?
Those young voters have abandoned Donald Trump in significant numbers. The latest poll showed the president is now 2 points underwater with working class voters. These are the people who have been Trump's base from the very beginning of his political career. They were supposed to be the unshakable foundation that got him elected time and again despite other challenges. And now they are showing serious signs of discontent. Their frustration is directed squarely at the man they once trusted implicitly.
Say no, absolutely not, and say it directly to the president, no.
The president, 3D, yes, shut up. Shut up about that. You don't threaten to wipe out an entire civilization.
He's out of control, and people within the administration need to step up, take responsibility, and rein this in. It's insanity. It's calling for the murder of an entire civilization of men, women, children, of innocent civilians.
How do we 25th Amendment his ass?
In terms of political temperature checks, those sorts of comments from someone like Megyn Kelly are genuinely notable. So is the fact that she has also acknowledged in recent days that Trump could make serious mistakes and she would still vote Republican over Democrat. So there is that caveat to keep in mind. But all the same, it highlights a degree of significant and unprecedented distance that we have not witnessed since he first descended that famous escalator. This is not just distance between Trump and his media supporters like Megyn Kelly. It is now distance between Trump and, as Megyn Kelly herself points out, the core blocks of MAGA voters who form the bedrock of his political strength. The New York Times conducted a fascinating analysis using artificial intelligence to examine more than 40,000 comments on Donald Trump's posts on his own social media platform. What they discovered was remarkable. They reported finding genuine unease and anger bubbling up within that echo chamber, revealing the true depths of the discontent over the war. One user who indicated on their profile page that they supported President Trump fully wrote that Trump had demonstrated what they called a lust for blood. Think about that for a moment. A self-identified full Trump supporter using that language to describe their own candidate. A conservative Trump supporter wrote that such rhetoric would ultimately destroy the president's legacy. The user added something that cuts to the heart of this moment. I am honestly heartbroken. Those are the words of someone experiencing genuine emotional disillusionment. While social media sites tend to have a large number of bot accounts muddying the waters, the New York Times specifically highlighted only examples showing no obvious signs of bot activity. They focused on genuine human responses. Only a quarter of the comments they analyzed were supportive of the president's actions, including posts praising Trump's backbone and asking him to finish the job. That means 3/4 of the comments from his own platform, his own digital home turf, were expressing some degree of concern, criticism, or opposition. And all of that analysis is just on the question of Iran, which has been grinding on for 40 days with no end in sight. Before that, there was the Epstein controversy, which Melania Trump recently dragged back into the center of American political discourse. It represents yet another issue over which MAGA supporters and MAGA media figures have expressed profound frustration with Donald Trump and his administration. The Epstein matter refuses to stay buried, and every time it resurfaces, it creates new waves of doubt and disillusionment among the faithful. Thanks to Melania Trump, for reasons that remain unclear even hours after her comments occurred, we have yet another layer to this unfolding drama. In case you missed those comments, Melania Trump went to the podium after specifically calling for the press pool to assemble. She wanted to discuss what she characterized as smears having to do with her and Jeffrey Epstein, despite the fact that few people seem to know what those alleged smears actually are. She also took the opportunity to call on Congress to continue investigating the matter, which is particularly striking given that her husband has repeatedly called the entire Epstein investigation a hoax. The contradiction is significant. Before we begin the hour properly, let me introduce our panel. Joining us is the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, who brings his expertise in tracking media narratives and their political impact. Also with us is Charlie Sykes, the author of the newsletter The Bulwark, whose insights into conservative movement dynamics are invaluable at moments like this. And Miles Taylor is still with us, bringing his unique perspective on the inner workings of government. Angelo, I am genuinely curious to know what all of you think the Melania Trump statement was actually about. But on this larger portrait of what Megyn Kelly describes, what Ann Coulter described in our previous segment, the conversation Miles and I just completed about the things that figures on the left and in the mainstream media have been saying for 9 years now, the picture that is emerging is striking. The conduct that many once considered violations of norms has now become routine. The situation seems, to quote Marjorie Taylor Greene, increasingly difficult to defend. And no one can keep straight anymore, whether in commentary or in straight political journalism, which crisis is supposed to be distracting from which other crisis. The whole thing has become an overwhelming blur of controversy and concern. I think there are a couple of things happening simultaneously that deserve our attention. One, the effects of all these controversies are cumulative in a way that is easy to miss if you are focused on individual incidents. Sometimes people are looking for that one defining moment where the critique they have been making finally causes something to suddenly and dramatically change. As you noted in the introduction, even though these figures are criticizing Trump, they are still careful to add that they would probably still vote for him. They are not willing to go that far yet. They are not ready to take that final step of abandoning him entirely. And that is where we are in the process right now. What is genuinely significant about this moment, though, the real substance of the analysis, is that because the effects are cumulative, it is not just that they are slowly wearing away at his support. It started with policy critiques, and that has been where the criticism has been lodged for quite a while. But as you noted, it is starting to get more personal now. They are starting to acknowledge that there is something at the very core here that is fundamentally concerning. There are issues of judgment that can no longer be ignored. There are issues of character that demand attention. That is all new territory. That is what happens when the effects are cumulative over time. It starts to tear down the protective shield that has surrounded him for so long. For a figure like Trump himself, he relies enormously on the performance of a particular character. He is a character. He has always been a character. That is precisely why he has gotten away with so much, because he is a character in this larger story, which means he is fundamentally a media creature. So not only does beginning to strip away some of that narrative make it harder for people to carry water for him, but when they are criticizing him, even if they are not willing to say they would change their vote, they are also no longer actively defending him. People who are separating from the president in this fashion are creating a permission structure for others to follow. The president put out a lengthy social media post about this situation, and I am going to read part of it so you understand what we are dealing with. The post reads, Tucker Carlson, who could not even finish college. He was a broken man when he got fired from Fox, and he has never been the same. Perhaps he should see a good psychiatrist. It should be noted that Tucker Carlson went to the White House as recently as February 23rd, just 5 days before the war began. The post continues, Megyn Kelly, who nastily asked me the now famous only Rosie O'Donnell question. It should be noted she campaigned with Trump in November of 2024. Candace Owens, who accuses the highly respected First Lady of France of being a man, and she is not. She interviewed the president in 2021 at Mar-a-Lago. And referring to Alex Jones, who says some of the most irresponsible things and lost his entire fortune, as he should have, for his horrendous attack on the families of Sandy Hook shooting victims, ridiculously claiming it was a hoax. It should be noted that Trump appeared on Alex Jones's show in December of 2015. He said to him directly, "Your reputation is amazing." It has been genuinely striking to observe the independent media figures, the podcasters and commentators, split with Trump over the war in ways we have not seen from the opinion hosts on Fox News or traditional conservative broadcast media. I actually examined the Spotify charts to see the top podcasts currently ranking, and it is very interesting. Among the top 14 podcasts on Spotify, 6 are hosted by people who, and these are not all politics podcasts, but 6 of those hosts happen to be individuals who have aligned with Trump in one way or another or endorsed him during the 2024 campaign, but who have now split with him, at least on the war, if not on other issues as well. This creates an unusual dynamic where people who are subscribing to these shows and hearing them regularly, people who may be more casual voters and perhaps not intense politics watchers, are now getting very skeptical takes on these issues in ways they may not have encountered otherwise. I am genuinely interested to see how this might play out in future elections. I do not know if we can measure exactly how something like this influences electoral outcomes, but it is very one-sided right now in this particular media space. The criticism is flowing in one direction. These numbers are remarkable. These are the most popular podcasts in the country. So this is an enormous audience, probably larger in the aggregate than most cable news daytime programming. And this represents a massive number of people who are hypothetically interested in Trump's politics, who are now hearing a great deal of criticism from influential figures in a media space that is not exclusively or even primarily political. These are exactly the type of infrequent potential voters that Republicans are so deeply worried about heading into the next election, precisely the ones they believe Trump is actively discouraging and at serious risk of losing. When we look at how all of this is playing out for the president, it has been genuinely striking this week to hear the backlash emerging from a number of voices in conservative and MAGA media when it comes to the president, specifically his rhetoric involving Iran and the annihilation of an entire culture. The voices are raw with frustration. One commentator captured the mood perfectly. "I do not know about you, but I am sick of this. I am just sick of it. Can he not just behave responsibly? You do not threaten to wipe out an entire civilization." Another voice added even more intensity. "It is wrong on every level. Open the strait. How dare you speak that way on Easter morning to the country? Who do you think you are?" And a third offered perhaps the most significant assessment. "How do we invoke the 25th Amendment? If I was the Democrats, I would stop provoking Trump. That only makes it worse. You need to watch out. This is not a man acting irrationally. This is real." So there you have some of the backlash, which is clearly based on what we are seeing from the president, and it is making its way directly to him. The criticism is penetrating even his carefully constructed information bubble, but I see very little genuine altruism in any of it. Much of it is fundamentally about attention and engagement. President Trump is never one to ignore a challenge, and the commentators know that criticizing him generates audience response. This is genuinely damaging for MAGA. This represents a sign of the fractures we have seen developing, with dozens of prominent voices already stepping back. This needs to be properly contextualized because I have seen some Republicans point to the data and argue that Trump still maintains the support of most of his base. And even though there are high-profile figures who have turned against him, either in Congress or in media, Trump remains more popular with the core MAGA base than those individual critics. And these things are broadly true. Trump still is the dominant figure in MAGA, the central personality that everyone else orbits around. But the problem with that analysis is actually threefold when you examine it carefully. One, Trump is term limited. And I know he has mused publicly about serving 3 terms, but I simply do not see how that is possible under any realistic scenario. Other people want to be president too. Even if only for reasons of personal ambition, he is not going to get another term because other ambitious figures want their turn. That ambition alone might be enough to stop any extended term scenario, but beyond that calculation, he is getting older. He is not particularly physically or mentally vigorous by any objective measure. He is on a ticking clock, as we all are, but his clock is considerably closer to that final hour than many others. So, if you are thinking about building alliances in the medium to long term, you absolutely have to look beyond Donald Trump. But it is also the fundamental mathematics of American politics that make this situation so precarious. The truth is that even if only, say, 10 to 15% of the MAGA base leaves Donald Trump, and that represents perhaps 5% of the overall electorate, even if the Republicans lose 5% of the electorate, if you take 5% of their vote away in a general election, they lose. They simply lose. In a contest as close as modern presidential elections, 5% is everything. The losses they took in the House and Senate in midterm elections were even larger than what we are discussing. 5% in a lot of close races is the entire ballgame. In the last several decades, I cannot think of a presidential election where 5% would not swing the outcome. Clinton in 1996, perhaps. Obama in 2008, possibly, but even in 2012, if Obama lost 5%, he loses that election. In 2016, Trump loses if 5% abandon him. In 2020, Biden loses with a 5% defection. The 2024 election, Trump loses again. The 2004 election, Bush loses. Trump losing 5% of his base is politically devastating. It is the end of the road.